There are many different job boards for truckers. Why use the job board on thetrucker.com? There's several reasons. Thetrucker.com's objective is to help professional truck drivers find quality truck driving jobs and to help trucking companies find quality truck drivers. Thetrucker.com has the most comprehensive listing of truck driving jobs and job resources, and new and existing job listings are updated regularly. Thetrucker.com's job search function is easy to use and allows job seekers to search for jobs by driver type, trailer type, route type, location, company, endorsement, and experience requirements. Our proprietary application processing system, or APS, uses a sophisticated algorithm to match and automatically send qualified driver applications to the trucking company in real time. So your job application is efficiently processed and submitted to the trucking company immediately after the APS matches your qualifications to the job requirements. When it's time to consider making a change, you can find the right resources at thetrucker.com.
You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live, where James Rogers, Jamie Irvine, and Tom Kelly provide owner-operators of commercial trucks with expert advice about starting, operating, and growing a professional trucking fleet. It's time to mind your trucking business.
And welcome in TNC Radio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly along with Jamie Irvin and James Rogers. Guys, how are you doing this week?
Good. I'm doing good. Getting ready for the holidays. So it's that little last push right at the end of the year.
Jamie, how about you?
Well, we're trying to keep warm up here in the Great White North. We've had some pretty cold temperatures and we got about a foot of snow on the ground, but that also opens up opportunities to go play in that snow. So I've been enjoying that.
So, Jamie, you're much closer to the North Pole than I am. Any sightings of, men in red outfits with white beards, that kind of stuff?
Well, usually this time of year, we do hear a little bit of the test runs. You know, they're just making sure that the sleigh is up to snuff. All the maintenance has been done. We oftentimes will hear a couple test runs, but no confirmed sightings yet.
All right. Rumors have been going on that Santa is considering moving to an automated sleigh with no Santa. They're just going to drop the packages off, and any truth to that you know about?
No, we this has been working for so long. I don't think we need to mess with it.
Well, good. I'm hoping that is just a rumor, and that we're not really looking to automate Santa's sleigh anytime soon. I think the whole reindeer thing has been working pretty well for a while.
Exactly.
I think I hear him going by right now. How about that? All right. Got a couple questions here for you guys here before we get too far into things. James, you've been, how many years is this for you now?
5, 6 years. Yeah.
So what does the holiday season do for you from a positive standpoint as far as business is concerned?
Well, traditionally in the past, this is my first year really having refrigerated trailers. But in the past, we've hauled all dry vans. And one of the positives we've seen is there's always a push. There's always a push about the end of that third quarter going all the way almost right up until Christmas. And then depending upon, like with Amazon over the last couple of years coming on, they gave us a really big push for retail freight. You know, obviously all the goodies and stuff that Santa Claus brings to people, it's got to get the staging lanes for him. So we would get a pretty big push. So that was always a positive, but also for me this year, as far as seeing the hauling refrigerated freight, there's definitely a big push because, you got the holiday meals. People are wanting to do meals. Some people stay in. and so on. So that's the number one big positive that I've seen usually around this time of year with the holidays, and our numbers have proven it. I mean, this year I was just talking about it like last night with my contractors. Is we're having probably the best quarter we've had in a couple of years, and it's really amazing.
That's great. What about from a negative perspective? What does it make it harder to run the business this time of year, or do you have downtime that ends up making this a less profitable quarter?
It can. It very well can. And one of the things that that is there is that the winter is hard on this equipment. I mean, it's steel, it's rubber, it's fiberglass, and more times than not, usually it's some sort of maintenance problem that causes that issue, or it's weather. Weather is a huge combatant this time of year just because of where we like to run and where the most profitable areas are. Like, if you remember a couple years back, we had that huge winter vortex that came through, and almost our entire fleet got stuck in it. We had to let it pass, and there was just no choice. I mean, it was just that bad. And then, of course, when you do have a maintenance problem, there's the issue of getting the part. Do they have the part on stock? If they don't, then we're at the mercy of them getting it, as well as whoever's bringing it, getting it through the weather. Another thing that kind of poses a problem that can have a good effect is it's the holidays. People are going to take time off. So a lot of these places that we're either picking up from, delivering to, or even if we're in the shop, they're going to be limited on manpower. So that's definitely a downside. And then, of course, there's that all inevitable thing that everybody's beating to death this year, especially. But in the wintertime, especially around the holidays, as the seasons get colder, fuel goes up, and they start adding a lot of anti-gel and stuff to the treated fuels, and that's going to create an increased cost for you, just because the engines don't get as good a fuel mileage in the wintertime.
Very interesting. Didn't even think of some of those as impacts. And then, of course, as you mentioned too, there's just the stuff driving down the road these days. As much sand and salt and stuff as certain areas have to put down because of traction issues and those kinds of things. That gets in there. That comes up the works. Yeah. You get that cleaned up. There's a lot of things that you have to watch out for this time of year that I didn't even think about.
Absolutely. And then, of course, this is a time of year, and I credit this to my veteran background, is this is also a time of year where I want to stay in contact with my contractors as much as possible. Maybe not every day, but at least every other day, just to see where their mental health is at, because some people don't go home, or some of them may be forced to work through the holidays, or they may get delayed, and it can really affect them. It can be, I don't want to use the term depressive, but you know where I'm going with it. It gets hard. It just gets hard.
It can be a depressing time of year for some people.
Yeah.
Jamie, you've been doing heavy duty parts for a long time, including the podcast, the Heavy Duty Parts Report. What kind of impact do the winter months have on the overall supply chain of parts? Is it significant? Is it something easy to plan for? Tell me a little bit. I mean, like I said, you've been doing this a long time. How many years?
I started in 1998, so 25 years this year.
Wow.
So wintertime is, you basically have two seasons when you're purchasing parts and you're preparing for, like, what parts do I need to have in stock? So you've got winter and summer. You've got cold weather time and warm weather time. And so going back probably about 4 or 5 months ago, you started to stock up in your DCs. You started to place orders for specific products. That could be the minus 40 degree windshield washer fluid, the anti-gels, the tire chains. So there batteries. There's a whole list of products that you have to prepare for wintertime. And you start to receive those orders in the fall and you start to stock up. So you want to try to move out your summer products, kind of blow them out as much as you can in September, so that you're making room by October for these winter products in your stores and your warehouses. And, then you start rolling them out. And by the time you get to December, where Christmas is imminent, a lot of parts companies, that's even if it's not their fiscal year end, all their salespeople run on a calendar year. So you're getting to the end of your calendar year. You either made your numbers or you didn't. And a lot of times in December, you're spending some of that downtime where things slow down a little bit around Christmas, getting your budget ready for next year, right? So there's a lot of activity. And what often happens too from a parts side is, yes, as people maybe shut down for the holidays, you might see a little bit less activity, but that can change on a dime if all of a sudden there's a fellow who, breaks down and needs some parts, really quickly to try to get his truck back on the road so he can make it home for Christmas. So over the years, there's been many times where you go to sit down to have your meal with your family, and all of a sudden your cell phone rings and you got to run out and go down to the store, open it up and get someone, a part that they need. And, you don't want to do that, but at the same time, you got to take care of your customers. So you do what you got to do. But that's kind of the trend in parts of how it goes.
Just from a raw materials standpoint and getting parts made so that you can use them, is there a notable slowdown during this time of year?
Well, see, historically, the supply chain was very good to us, and there was very rarely any issues with a lack of raw materials or with even lack of availability. Like most of my career, the problem was that our customers had too many options. And so we were in a dogfight with our competitors to try to sell them parts. Of course, in the last couple of years, that's changed. One thing that happens in the wintertime for the actual trucking industry that is responsible for moving raw materials like oil and gas and lumber and things like that is the wintertime is a really tough time to operate equipment. And so there's a lot more breakdowns, and there can be some delays in on the trucking fleet side where they've got a certain amount of lumber they got to move out of the cut block and they just can't get it out, or they've got a certain amount of petroleum products they've got to move by tanker and they're having issues. Believe it or not, though, it's actually spring that's more difficult than winter. Up here in Canada, when everything freezes solid, it's actually in many ways it can be a lot easier to move over the landscape. You get into the spring when things start melting, and that's a completely different environment, and that can be really problematic. So, I think historically we haven't had a lot of issues, but over the last couple of years, obviously it's been a once in a lifetime kind of situation, and there's been a lot of complications.
Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting as we're spread around the U.S. and Canada. I'm working out of the Gulf Coast. Obviously, the season we worry more about is September, October, maybe back into August from a hurricane standpoint. And you have to be prepared for, what could be a severe choking of the supply chain during that. This time of year, not too worried. We might maybe this year get below freezing. We might not. So you don't worry about certain things. So it all kind of depends on where you are. And it's interesting to see the way that this business is impacted by, but not completely controlled by the weather, the seasons, and those types of things.
Well, and think about this. I'll just say this real quick before our break, right? Like if you left my house right now, it's minus 22 Fahrenheit. But if you drove due south for a few hours, you could be going through the Rocky Mountains, and then you could be coming out the other side of it in a completely different, with a much warmer temperature. Exactly. So depending on where you're driving, you're gonna see a lot of variation in temperature and weather.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a few minutes. You're listening to TNCradio.live. Mind your trucking business. We'll be right back.
You're listening to TNCRadio.live. Remember to tune into the Truckers Network radio show with Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, is boosting the image of the industry by telling the story of trucking, and your story can be part of it. Upload a photo, tell us what you love about trucking, or send us a story about a good deed or charitable act in trucking. Be sure to follow us on social media and contact us through truckingmovesamerica.com. That's truckingmovesamerica.com.
Catch Landline Now every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, along with an encore presentation weekdays at noon, right here on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Thank you, Ron. I'm Jamie Irvin, and I'm with Tom Kelly and James Rogers. And we have been talking over the last couple weeks about the coming electric movement, the EVs that are coming to the commercial trucking industry. We see what's happening with specific mandates around how many vehicles are going to be sold by certain dates. And, we see that really by 2035 to 2040, states like California and countries like Canada and European countries have said that they're going to be 100% electric vehicle, and that impacts the commercial trucking industry. Now, we want to go off the top here, Tom. Are we against EVs here at Mind Your Trucking Business?
Oh, heavens no. But I think EVs are wonderful. I also think Santa Claus is wonderful. It's not that I'm against EVs. I don't believe in EVs. I don't think that we are anywhere near prepared for what it's going to take to make this, to make all this happen. And I think we're making a mistake by investing in some of the things that we're investing in right now on a promise for something that doesn't add up. Just mathematically doesn't add up.
Right. So when you say that you don't believe in EVs, what you're saying is you don't believe in EVs as a viable solution to a proposed problem that is yet to be fully understood. Is that a fair categorization of what you meant?
Well, what we have right now, as far as what our plan is to solve the problem, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and we'll talk more about that today. But I don't see how the whole thing adds up, and we got some big questions we have to answer before we go. Okay, yes, this solves the problem, and this moves us forward. Right.
So there's a metaphor called a Cassandra, and it's based in Greek mythology. But anyway, the idea is that you have a problem, and then you take action to solve that problem, and then the problem doesn't actually materialize because you took the necessary action, and therefore then people say, well, we never had the problem in the first place. A good example of that is Y2K. So if you're old enough to remember the turn of the century, there was a big problem coming with computer systems because the dates only had a 2-digit date code instead of 4. So then all of a sudden, when we switch from 99 to 2000, are the computers going to think that that's 1900 and our plane's going to fall from the sky and our bank's going to close? And there was all this alarmist information about the potential of a really big problem. And they went to work and they, by and large, solved the problem. And of course, 2000 came and went and nothing really happened of any significance. And so then people were frustrated saying, well, why did we have to do all of that to solve the problem? So is the environmental climate change catastrophe that is predicted by some, is that a legitimate reason to then put into policy and mandate solutions that are both neither fiscally nor logistically realistic? And by virtue of taking those possible steps that are we going to actually make a worse, are we going to make a bigger problem than the one we're trying to solve, right? So we're not by any means denying the science around climate change or the possible long-term impacts of that at all. But what we're saying is that we are moving very quickly right now. And the countries, the United States, Canada, European countries, other Commonwealth countries are putting policies in place that are proving to be almost impossible to bring to fruition without adversely impacting the people that we're trying to save.
Exactly. I will submit, for the sake of argument, if nothing else, that every environmentalist, every climatologist, 100% right. We got a big major problem, and it has to be solved. Where I disagree is, are we on the path to solve the problem?
So I'd like to put forward a concept on this, because I think it actually gets to the philosophical heart, and this allows us to avoid becoming entangled in any kind of like partisan political discussion. At the end of the day, are people aiming for human flourishing, or are they aiming at reducing human impact on the planet? And the reason why I think that's an important distinction is because I have started to notice that the people many people who are backing this like alarmist catastrophe narrative seem to also want to reduce or even possibly eliminate human impact on the biosphere. That's a very different motivation and goal. And if you take that out to its logical end, it's really bad for a lot of human beings. Versus, look, we want humans to flourish, and so we need to take whatever appropriate steps necessary to make the maximum amount of people on this planet flourish to the highest degree. And of course, in order to make humans flourish, you have to also protect the environment. Do you see the distinction between those two philosophical stands? Because I think we're seeing this play out in real time, and I don't think people are on the side of human flourishing, because otherwise they wouldn't be making the decisions they're making, which we can so clearly are negatively impacting a large amount of human beings.
Because I was going to say, for a contrarian, the normal everyday citizen, based on what you just said, you're right, because now okay, you just said that, but based on our last episode, we saw the numbers and the impact that it's actually having on the biosphere and the environment and the planet, and the numbers just don't add up. So it's like you really do pose a really good question right there.
The reason I bring this up is, like, if you look at the distribution of charging and where that takes us, like, we've already talked about taxes, we've already talked about the resources. We want to, in our next segment, talk about the distribution of charging. But you look at some of the mandates and some of the decisions that are being made in the name of trying to avoid this climate catastrophe, and yet what we're actually doing is we're going to put a large group of people who at one time were flourishing into a position where they're going to really be suffering. And all you have to do is look at Germany right now, where they have, enacted all of these mandates around energy, and they're going back to burning wood and coal right now this winter because they've eliminated all this clean energy. So again, if we're going to look at really setting up humans to succeed, we got to look at human flourishing. And in order for people to flourish, they have to have abundant, cheap energy.
Let me jump in.
Clearly established by a lot of scientists.
Yeah, let me jump in. I don't completely agree with what you put out there. I think you're leaving out a group, and a very important group, and that's the me flourishing group. Who, and I'm sorry to be the cynical one here, but I also believe there is a large group in the midst of all of this who see what others perceive as this major problem and have basically said, yes, that's a major problem, and I'm going to provide the solution, and you're going to pay me to do it.
Yeah, and those people, but that actually supports my argument, Tom, because those kinds of people are not interested in human flourishing. They're interested in a small group of people being very, very wealthy off of this.
Right, and they're also not interested in saving anything in the environment. There's nothing about the environment or the globe or whatever that they really care about either. All they care about is their own personal profit. And there are many times when I listen to some of these people talk and I say, look, it's clear to me you want my money. So exactly how much of my money do you want? And what is it that will make you go away and leave me alone? And that's when we start getting into things like, credit, pollution credits and clean air credits. And, basically this group is going to give that group money because of the perceived damage that the other group has been through. And look, it becomes a money grab for a whole lot of people. And I'm afraid that there are much more of those than I can even understand a group that says, I am so worried about the impact of human beings on this earth. And I hold Earth, Mother Nature up as a higher power. And okay, I don't agree with it, but I get it. And I can respect that. I don't respect those who say, oh, I see a problem here and I'm going to provide the solution. It's like the bad guy in the movie that everybody doesn't realize is the bad guy till the last part of the movie.
Right. And I personally, my opinion is both of those groups, they've got significant problems in their logic chain, right? So one is obviously motivated by greed and doesn't care about human suffering. The other person who takes that idea of like, well, we got to save the planet at all costs, even if we have to destroy humankind, and our way of life and all of those things, they're missing the point that that by taking that stance, some of the decisions being made actually make it impossible for us to make any real progress on even the things that they want to make progress on, like improving the environment. So in our next segment, I want us to go into depth of another way that EVs right now and the proposed mandates and where we're headed is just not sustainable. So after the break, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about that, the distribution of charging and how that's going to impact the commercial trucking industry. We'll be right back.
Ready for a music break? Did you know that you can use the TNCRadio.live app to hear the best in traditional country? Traditional country, the good stuff from the 50s and 60s and on. Traditional country is more than a time period. It's a style and approach to music that we cherish. We have an incredible collection of songs that define country music and also sprinkle in some Western music, cowboy music, bluegrass, Americana, and country gospel. Our TRUSA president and country western music icon Rex Allen Jr. also hosts an hour of music and memories. At TRUSA, we have a heart for the road and the heritage of country music. Wherever you roam, we hope you'll take us with you. Enjoy the ride on Truckers Radio USA. To listen to TRUSA Radio on the TNCRadio.live app, just click on the music button and then TRUSA.
For the latest in rideshare and gig economy news, visit UberLiftDrivers.com. That's UberLiftDrivers.com.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Thanks, Ron. I'm Jamie Irvin, and we're with Tom Kelly and James Rogers. We've been talking about the move towards electric vehicles and whether or not it's reasonable for us to expect that within the next 10 to 15 years, we are going to be able to rely on electric vehicles as pretty much our sole method of transportation. And of course, this deeply impacts the commercial trucking industry. we're going to talk about the distribution of electricity and charging stations and how that might work in the commercial trucking industry moving forward. But before we do that, I just wanted to double check. So, James, we've already solved the parking issue with commercial trucks, correct? Like that problem is like in our rear view mirror. That is solved. Like you're on the road every day. Could you weigh in on that, James?
No, it's a myth. That's a complete fallacy right there. I mean, no, we're nowhere near close to it. There's actually been propositions to it, and a lot of the states have shot it down. Probably one of the most visible in the public eye would probably be what's going on in New York City right now. They're literally their mayor I think it's mayor and city leaders and stuff. They're going around and actually towing drivers' trucks that are parked bobtail at their home, and they're using city ordinances to do it. And the argument being brought up is the closest place to park is, outside of the city, miles and miles away. They've tried to put a Band-Aid on it, like Florida, with injection money, but they're like, okay, how are we going to do this? But no, at the end of the day, no, that's a fallacy. Complete
right.
false statement.
So the reason I bring that up kind of tongue in cheek is because, Tom, you've got a major concern around how the distribution of charging and electricity would work in this utopian future that is being put in front of us, where we're going to solve all the environmental issues by going electric. Could you just articulate to us what your concerns are around this, and maybe give us a point of reference? Because for some of us, maybe we haven't thought this through yet.
Yeah, well, we'll start off with, first of all, let me point you guys back again to the ATRI, and that's the American Transportation Research Institute, a recent paper that they put out that spells out some of the things. They don't spell out everything on our list of issues, but they do take on a couple of them. This is one of the challenges that they looked at, was this whole area around truck charging requirements. And again, we're going to keep it focused on trucking, but you have to remember this also impacts everybody who would be driving cars that would be EVs instead of ICEs, internal combustion engines. So if we're going to move to a battery powered electric vehicle, a BEV, instead of an ICE, we have to figure out how we're going to handle the charging. Now, somebody out there is thinking, don't worry about it. The technology will happen that we will have batteries that will last much, much longer than the batteries we have now. After all, the batteries we have now weren't imaginable 20 years ago, and that's why we're getting to this point. And some of that might be true, but it doesn't exist right now. And it could be that there will be some kind of incredible breakthrough in battery technology, and batteries will suddenly last for thousands of miles and recharge in less than 3 minutes and all those kinds of good things. That could happen. And,
but what if it doesn't?
And Santa could show up at your house and give you $1 million too. It could happen. But right now, that doesn't exist. Okay. So until that exists and solves the problem is we don't even know where to put all the trucks on a normal night right now.
Yeah.
And you don't have to drive very far from wherever you live in the US or Canada to find a whole lot of trucks who are parked on the side of the road near a rest stop, who are parked near an exit where there happen to be four truck stops all together, but they're already all booked up for the night. First of all, let's look at the simple math here. How long do you guys think it would take to charge the batteries for a BEV truck?
Oh gosh, if I had to base it off of what I know now of talking to people that have Teslas, or what it costs to charge them just to go 200-300 miles, or the time,
yeah.
it would far exceed 10 hours. It really would.
No, actually you could probably charge them in somewhere between through 3 hours or so.
That would destroy somebody's hours of service right there.
Okay. And why is that?
Well, I mean, by law, we're only allowed to drive 11 hours in a day. So if you get held up for 3 hours, given that you have an available charging station open, that's going to completely shoot your clock. Now, more than likely, you're not going to have that station available.
Yeah, but that by itself. So let's back up one notch here. Let's say, for the sake of this argument, we have solved the parking problem, and that there's the exact number of spots needed to park the car, to park the trucks that need to park because of hours of service operations, good safe driving. For whatever reason, let's say there's plenty of parking. Okay. If everything is battery driven, do we not need to hook up to batteries?
Yeah, we do.
And recharge them. Okay, so if I come into a lot and there's perfect amount of parking and perfect amount of charging stations, how do I get the electricity there?
That's the question.
Do we understand how much electricity it would really take to get there?
Well, they actually tried it. I mean, as a side note, I don't know if you guys remember years ago, there were truck stops where, for a long time, you weren't allowed to idle your trucks anywhere. So they tried that concept of the idle air. A lot of the truck stops had idle air where they had these big racks and systems over the parking spots that would pump in, whether it was electricity or air conditioning, stuff like that. It cost way too much, and that's why they got rid of it. It was completely infeasible.
So we have some numbers that give us an idea of what it would take to charge, say, 50 trucks at the same time.
Oh, Lord.
Okay. So let's say you've got a truck stop, you've got 50 parking spots. But this isn't the way the world really works, is it? Where we all stop at the same time. We can't ever really solve the parking spot issue, can we? Because at a certain level, we don't all work in such a rotation that there's a time when every single parking spot will be available for every single truck who needs one. Do you agree with that? I mean, we can make it better than it is, but it just the math isn't there. We simply can't have one parking spot for every single truck at every single location where a truck might need to stop.
Agreed.
Okay. So that's not going to happen. So we're going to have times when somebody has stopped, they're charging their truck. It takes 3 hours to charge the truck, and they've gone to bed, right?
Yep.
And now here I am. I need to charge my truck. All the spots are taken. Where am I going to go?
That's the question.
Okay.
You're more or less stuck.
So let's say, and I think the math is pretty clear here, and you can get this from the ATRI, that you have a long haul truck that has a battery capacity of 1,000 kilowatt hours. Okay, which based on his load can give him about 336 miles. Okay, and would take approximately, using a 210 outlet, 220, 221, whatever it takes, recharging time at 210 kilowatt hours, it would take approximately 3.8 hours to charge.
Jeez.
Okay, so think about that now for a minute. How many charging stations do you really need?
And Tom, those numbers are optimal numbers. That doesn't take into account the age of the vehicle as the batteries begin to weaken, and it doesn't take into account the impact of battery performance based on weather.
Nor does it take into account that it makes the assumption that every single battery charging station is in prime operating working order, and nobody has damaged it in any way, and it has not been damaged by the weather. It's just everything works perfect.
Okay, so we're gonna take a break right now. When we come back from the break, we're gonna round out today's episode, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about this. Try to give you some more information to help you to be better informed. Because the reality is, the better informed we are, I think that knowledge gives us power. So let's talk a little bit more about this when we come back from our break.
Hot Shots Secret presents Steve Summers' Overnight Drive nightly at midnight Eastern, 11 Central on TNCRadio.live or download the app .tncradio.live.
For the best information source when it comes to trucking industry business news, go to thetrucker.com. From the latest spot rates and freight market stats to who's buying who and who's partnering with who in the world of motor carriers and fleets, the business page provides valuable insights on every aspect of the trucking industry. In addition, the section offers tips for making the most of carrier and driver discounts at travel centers across the nation. Wondering how COVID-19 is impacting the industry this week? Need tips for building business as an owner-operator or choosing the best carrier as a company driver? Curious about the latest news about nuclear verdicts? Find these answers and more in the business section of thetrucker.com. The Trucker News staff produces engaging business content for not only thetrucker.com, but also the Trucker newspaper, which has served the trucking industry for more than 30 years. With a focus on professional truck drivers, the Trucker News staff works to provide content that is relevant, objective, and engaging, pertaining to the trucking segment of the transportation industry. Just go to thetrucker.com or use the TNCRadio.live app to access the latest in trucking industry news.
You're listening to TNC Radio.live, and this is Mind Your Trucking Business. My name is Jamie Irvin. I'm with Tom Kelly and James Rogers. We've been talking about electric vehicles and the numbers. We've been running the numbers, Tom, on the distribution of electricity at charging stations and what it would take if the mandates and if the legislation that our governments are putting in place today comes to pass and all of these commercial vehicles move to electric, what is it going to take to charge them, and how on earth is that going to work? Now, you were in the middle of giving us some of the math. Let's keep going down that road. I'd like to understand more exactly what it's going to take to charge all these vehicles.
Okay, so I refer you again to this ATRI article, and especially Table 20, which I think is kind of the amazing piece of all of this. Let's say that every charger can do 3.8 hours. So how many charges can each charger do per day, roughly? Let's call it 4. Let's call it 4. So they could do 6. How many chargers would we need to handle a fleet of a couple of million trucks that are out there?
That wouldn't, one charging station would not even charge my entire fleet in a 24-hour period. And I've only got 7 trucks.
If each truck needed to be charged, for 3 hours and then be able to drive for 10 hours. Yeah. So you would still need, though, to cover what we need out there, at least 250,000 truck, 250,000 charging stations, at least. Okay. And that's in a perfect world. Okay. Well, now let's distribute them. Let's put them out there where the drivers are. You've got a parking lot. You've got 50 spots open. You've got a charging station for each spot. Somehow we've managed to make it possible for you to have your turn at the charging station without violating the rules of service. Sleep is no longer an option, and we're going to make everything perfect in this scenario. We got to get the power to where the charging stations are, right?
Right.
How much power is that going to take?
In a funny way, the only thing that comes to mind is Doc Brown from Back to the Future. 1.21 gigawatts. Yeah. That's about what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, I mean the problem is it would take probably the equivalent of something like what you would need to power between 5 and 10,000 homes 24 hours a day.
A nuclear power plant.
For each power plant. Yes. So we're talking about.
Okay, sorry, Tom. Can we just? I want to back up here. You said that we need about 250,000 charging stations,
right?
Okay, just to put it into perspective, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration website, currently there are about 160,000 gasoline stations in the country, 10,000 alternative fuel stations in the United States. So
right.
That's like about 170,000. So we're talking about a net increase of 70,000 charging stations over the existing fuel stations that are out there for ICE engines.
We would need 70,000
more than just to get up to that number of 250,000.
Right. So we're looking, and I'm going to solve the math here for you rather quickly, just so that we can kind of put a cap on this particular challenge that's before us. We're looking at an initial outlay just to put everything together and to get the power out to these stations and to create them all and all that kind of stuff. Roughly around $35 billion, without trying to figure out where we're going to get the land, how we're going to build all this stuff. Where it would cost $35 billion just to build the infrastructure. That does not include the other issue that we have in all of this, the other distribution issue, which is where the power plants are, and how we're going to. We talked about this in a different context a few weeks back when it got so hot out in California. They were asking people to turn off their AC because the power company couldn't keep up.
Does that study that you're looking at, does it tell you the additional kilowatt hours in billions that we would need to power all of these vehicles in addition to what we currently use? Does it give you that statistic?
Yeah, that's in here someplace too, and I don't remember exactly where that is, but it's significantly higher than where we are. Right. Your point being that when you add it up at the end, how much overall power increase do we need as far as electricity to charge everybody doing that? Again, it's just not there.
Yeah, because now, the U.S. produces 4,108 billion kilowatt hours with its current infrastructure. That doesn't charge very many electric vehicles. That's just the electricity we currently use. 61% of that electricity is generated by fossil fuels, 18.9% by nuclear, and only 19.8% by renewables. One of those renewables is wood, which when you burn wood is absolutely terrible for the environment. So, the math just doesn't add up. Just on electricity, just on land, just on infrastructure, the whole thing is not sustainable. To use a pun.
And we're not getting even into some of the more technical issues about every single foot that we run high tension electrical wires, we bleed off energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in a perfect utopian system, they would literally have to have either mini power plants or power plants within, I'd say, a couple hundred miles, maybe?
A lot less than that.
Yeah. So there goes the truck parking problem. They need the land for the power plants.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's just, again, there's this hope, there's this prayer that's out there that we'll figure out the technology here real quick because this is really important. We figured out the technology to put man on the moon, and we'll figure out the math for this as well. I hope you do, but this is only one of the challenges. We talked about taxes as being one of the challenges. how we're actually going to charge these things are one of the challenges. How we're going to build the battery. There's more challenges, and we'll talk about them in the weeks to come as well. But we're coming to the end of our program for tonight. Again, nobody here is against EVs. Not against them. We just don't believe in them. And I'm concerned that a lot of people are swallowing this snake oil that is supposed to solve everything in the future, when the truth of it is, it doesn't look like it's going to solve anything in the future because it doesn't exist to do anything.
Well, and the problem, Tom, is that they're gonna try to do it, but the outcome of trying to do it has the potential to be more devastating than any of the problems they're trying to solve.
Exactly.
That's where I take issue with all of this.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, I'm the same way.
And somebody's going to get rich, and somebody else is not going to get rich.
I mean, a tinfoil hat on my head right now saying, man, they're going to try it. Like Jamie said, they're going to try it and they're going to force it. And then it's going to do us just like Germany, and it may be too late to put us back to coal and wood and everything else, and nobody's going to be prepared for it.
Exactly. So kind of a crazy mess. Guys, we're going to take off the next couple of weeks as we get into the holiday season. We'll be back with all new shows in January. But in the meantime, I want to wish everybody who's listening in a very happy holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all that good stuff. You can continue to listen in to tncradio.live, catch your Christmas music, and we got all sorts of good things planned for you over the course of the next couple of weeks. And Jamie, how are things going over with the HeavyDutyPartsReport.com?
We are doing great and looking forward to rounding out this year. We had a record year for listeners and for the amount of engagement we had from a growing audience. So we cannot thank people enough. We wish everyone that they have a really happy holidays, and we cannot wait to get back in 2023 and get started to do it all over again.
Fantastic. And James, tell us about how people can hear your stuff. Maybe they haven't caught up with you yet. They want to get caught up and hear all about what you do. Where would they go to do that?
Yeah, they should go on to YouTube, search up the Road Rage Podcast. This time of year, I really like especially when I'm home more in the home studio, I really like to take the opportunity to kind of keep in touch with the drivers. Like I said, for me, on a personal level, this is a really hard time a year for a lot of drivers. And I just like to, put out content or even do live shows, call-in shows, just to give them somebody to talk to, interact with. Because, I mean, believe it or not, a lot of guys live in their trucks. A lot of guys are out here away from their families for months at a time, weeks at a time, and it can get difficult. So as a side note, just come check me out there, participate, or even, if you're out on the road, say something kind to them. You might just change their day or their week.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Well, with all that in mind, again, we wish you all a very happy holiday season, and we'll be back in no time. tncradio.live. More great programming coming up right after this.
Do you have the tncradio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the tncradio.live app today.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.